Okay, welcome back. So now we're going to do a video about foundations. Michelle, what can you say about foundations?
Foundations are the most important part of your spiritual practice, and there's a few layers to foundation, and all of them are really important. So the first piece about foundation is your spiritual foundation, having a really good, solid spiritual foundation. But also having a solid emotional, psychological, integrated foundation to build that on top of, right? Because if we're trying to build a spiritual foundation on top of a lot of trauma or big gaps, then we create a situation where we have to go back and then refill in the foundation at a later point, right? And we really, and everyone's on their own path, but where my heart is at is that everybody can have a really good, really solid foundation for their higher calling, for what they came here to do, and to not have to go back and redo things in a really big way, right? So just some examples, there's spiritual celebrities maybe that have made really big names for themselves and then had a big collapse at a certain point of it and then had to kind of rebuild from ground zero, right? And when we kind of reverse engineer without judgment why these things might happen, we can often see that it's likely that there's a foundation hole, that people are kind of going back to refill for something even bigger and greater. And so if we can just kind of start with the ends in mind, start with the ends in mind, we can give ourselves the space and the patience to build a really solid foundation that's going to serve us for a lifetime.
It's a really good point, and it's kind of like long-term thinking, right? A lot of us want to rush to something. We think the spiritual path is only going to take 2 years, right? It's the same with anything, right? Like your foundation takes more time than the rest of it, but it's more important, right? You could build a great house or even like a palace, but if the foundation isn't laid properly, or if the house and the foundation aren't connected well, it's going to crumble, pretty fast, and there's nothing you can do about it. So rather than focusing on speed or how flashy your practice looks or how it feels like it's helping you today, it's really helpful to start thinking, how can I build a foundation that's going to last my whole life? We get a long-term view. I'm going to build my practice so that it serves me forever, and it never stops, it never crumbles. And the more we can get this long-term view, the more we'll have the patience to put the pieces in place, and we won't rush, we won't cut corners, we're not going to try to look for quick progress, and this will create something solid. Okay, so what I consider a foundation are like pretty much like ethical principles, just making sure that your actions are in accordance with what's good and what's proper. Foundation is not complicated practice. It's also not sexy, right? So that's why people don't really want to talk about it. That's why the word ethics and morality makes people want to run away.
It's why God picked John to talk about foundations.
I'll take that as a compliment. It's interesting that I become someone who talks about this a lot, but it is, right? Like, obviously as a monk, that's one of the main things I've practiced, and I found a very flexible way of practicing it. It's not rigid. Yes, I was rigid in my practice for a while, and I eventually learned how to be flexible and free while maintaining proper principles and boundaries and ethics and morals and behavior. Okay, that's it. And you want to learn how to do both. And yes, in the beginning, because your mind isn't flexible. Your mind is too black and white. And so when someone gives you a principle to live by, you're going to interpret it as being too rigid, but that's not the fault of the principle. That's the fault of the way you're interpreting the principle. And eventually, through your own practice, you will learn to have a flexible mind. You'll attain some mental freedom, and you'll see that there's no contradiction between living within this principle and being completely free and joyful at the same time. Happiness comes from discipline, and freedom comes from boundaries. This is interesting. Happiness comes from discipline, and freedom comes from boundaries. how does freedom come from boundaries? So just by the way, when I use the word boundary, I use it maybe a little bit differently than what other people do, because we use this word in retreat in Buddhism, and retreat is where you pull back from regular life and you set up certain boundaries between, so that you can stay within your practice. But the boundaries are mostly boundaries upon your own body, speech, and mind. So you pretty much decide the things that you'll do and the things that you won't do, the things that you'll say and the things that you won't say, the things that you'll think and the things that you won't think. And so on retreat, I'm not going to let myself romanticize about a novel or something, or go way off into solving some engineering problem, or get really into this new supplement or whatever. On a retreat, I pull back from any ordinary way of thinking and I keep my mind controlled, and I only put it on spiritual practice. Same with my speech. On retreat, I might keep silence on retreat, or I might keep half-day silence, and the other half do mindful speech, where I'm only talking about things that are beneficial or trying to help people, right? Talking about the weather can be beneficial, meaningful speech if it's done with a good intention to help somebody and make a connection. So you see how it's not rigid, right? Having a good intention makes it a good action, and you can bring that into anything, even if it's quote unquote meaningless, right? And so this is the way that you can practice, is just trying to keep flexible and just think, okay, how can I control my speech where I only say things that are meaningful and beneficial? How can I control my body so my body is only doing things? For example, if I keep my body inside the grounds of the temple where I used to live, you're pretty much just going to be all set, right? And then you just have to not hurt people with your body, which is pretty easy to accomplish, right? And so, your body, keeping boundaries on your body, right? But that includes taking drugs, that includes sexual misconduct, that includes, it could include anything that involves, you want to use your body for good, essentially. You want to use your speech for good, you want to use your mind for good. That's all it means. Keeping a good foundation isn't actually more complicated than that. And it takes a little bit of introspection, a little bit of work, a little bit of effort, but it's worth it. Everything you do in this will pay you dividends for the rest of your life if you put in some work now.
Mm-hmm. And from the perspective as well of an emerging spiritual entrepreneur, right, having a very solid spiritual foundation is going to allow you to be primed and prepared to have a bigger business and ultimately to be able to impact more people and more lives.
Yeah. So now you mentioned earlier about having to go back and redo the foundation. Now I've had to do that a couple times, and it wasn't like I had to redo all of it, but I did some foundational work, I did some advanced work, and at some point I realized in order to make any more, things are shaky, the whole house is shaky, and eventually I realized it's not because I'm doing something wrong here, it's because my foundation isn't proper.
Yeah.
I need to fix this, and this will take care of itself.
Yes.
Right? That's how it works, is the rest of it takes care of itself in many ways if you fix the foundation. So I just have to go back, redo some foundational stuff. That's normal, that's natural. You're gonna have to do that. There's no shame in doing that. It's okay that you'll do that, and just the sooner that you can be okay with that happening, and admit to yourself if that ever is the case, the sooner you'll be able to fix it and move on.
Yeah, because otherwise it's just a problem of pride, right? And pride is not good. Pride does not help us, right? So just being brutally honest with ourselves, right? In love and kindness and gentleness. But just taking a look at, even though I think I'm this far along, even though I have this sense of I'm this far along, and I feel like my ego says I shouldn't have a foundation issue right now, and this shouldn't be a foundational piece, am I willing to be humble enough to admit that this is a foundational piece that's missing? And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with seeing that there's something in your foundation that's trying to upgrade or update, and just learning to love and embrace the process. But sometimes I've noticed that sometimes people will just, I remember there's somebody I knew that had a healing business, and they began to put themselves out as a healer, seeing clients, seeing a large number of clients, really 8-hour days, extremely high caseload, and this person ended up crumbling and having to close their business at a certain point. And it was just really a challenging thing as someone that cared about this person to watch and to see. And also it was extremely illuminating for me in terms of the mirror of reflection, for me to be able to see, why did this show up in my reality? Why did this situation show up in my reality at this moment? There's some foundational pieces that need to be in place. And especially if you have a strong background in psychology, counseling, more on kind of the grounded side of things. John's a former substance use counselor. I'm a former trauma therapist. We can feel that we've got the spiritual foundation locked up tight because we've been guiding people in a particular way for a long time. But the reality is that there is a difference between a spiritual foundation that's going to last you a lifetime and a foundation in any field that's connected to the 3D systems and structures of the world.
Yeah.
And this is a really important distinction. Yeah. This is a really important distinction, so we need to be vigilant and alert to fully integrating the gifts and skills that we've cultivated in maybe these other fields or other professions, while also bringing the foundation up to the highest frequency that you've embodied, and then doing that with ease, grace, and flow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I had that job, it was essentially a desk job, right? So it's a little office job. It's like a desk job, right? Yes, I was a counselor. I did groups and one-on-one, and I was good. Like compared to the other people in the office, I was one of the best, maybe even the best. And I was brand new, right? 6 months in, I was already a star at this job. But inside, if I'm honest, I was like crumbling. I actually was. I was crumbling. I could hardly hold it together in my life, yet I could still perform that job by whatever standards there were quite well, okay? And so and then I moved to the temple 6 months into that job, and I started actually learning the foundations, and not just learning, but getting them, acquiring them. And after 3 months of being there, I became a peaceful, happy person, and I worked with young adults. My boss told me they thought I was like a god, or when behind my back, that's what they thought. I was like doing good. Like, so once I started getting the foundations in place, I performed way better at that job, and you will too. So I want to say, like, one thing that separates, Michelle from maybe some other people, and myself as well, is high levels of integrity. Right? I've noticed it about Michelle. Like, she has high levels of integrity. When she learns that something's not in alignment, every ounce and fiber of her being wants to authentically line up with it and work it out, right away, right? She doesn't just carry on and pretend and think it's okay.
That there wasn't something incorrect, just pointed out within me. Yeah.
And so we can call this integrity, right? And so integrity and foundations is like the same thing, right? Integrity means that you just live in accordance with the values and principles that you feel are proper, and you just do it. And integrity, like think about a building with internal integrity, structural integrity. It means it's strong enough to hold itself together, right? That's what it means in the engineering world. Integrity, structural integrity. It has strength and support in various places, so it can keep its shape and structure and form no matter what comes at it. Mm-hmm. And so we want our spiritual life to be like this. That's what we want. We want to be able to be rocked from the outside and have no damage, right? And we don't just crumble upon our own weight and whatever. Does that make sense? So this is what it means, and I want to highlight what Michelle has been doing because it's in action. It's not just something that you do on the cushion. It's something you practice in action, and in the day you're always just checking and making sure, am I doing it right? Am I in integrity? Am I being beneficial? Right? Am I using my body, speech, and mind to help others? And this type of checking is a really good first step. Always just checking, what am I doing? What am I about to say? What's my intention right now? Checking your intention. What's my intention? Am I trying to hurt people? Am I just zoned out into something meaningless? Am I actually going to harm somebody right now? We need to know, and we need to not allow it if it's going to be harmful, or even at some point your integrity and foundation prevents you from doing anything ordinary and neutral, and you only do things that are positive. That's actually what you want, is to be purely positive.
That's really where our foundations are headed.
That's what spiritual means. Spiritual and neutrality are not the same. Neutral is ordinary. It's taking you in the wrong direction. Neutral is actually the wrong direction for a spiritual person. For someone who's struggling in crisis, neutral is the right direction. For a spiritual person, neutral is definitely
backwards.
It's the wrong. It's very dangerous.
Yeah.
So we need to be positive and peaceful instead of ordinary and neutral.
Yeah.
So your own ways of thinking and being and your intentions need to be purely positive and actually trying to help, and not just coasting in a neutrality. That's a danger zone. Trust me.
Yeah.
Trust me on that.
I love everything you said, and there's a few points about integrity that I'd like to expand upon, and I want to connect it back to some of the original points that we made about rigid mind and rigid thinking. And one thing that can happen when we step into higher frequencies is that we need to deconstruct values, because a lot of how we've learned what values are has been really maybe misinterpreted or interpreted through a lens of negativity, negative ego, or even trauma and abuse. And so when we think about something like integrity, it's really important that we're following an idea of integrity that's in alignment to having energetic and structural integrity, versus having integrity from a place of seeing our value placed outside of ourselves, right?
Like a rule book.
Like a rule book, right? So let me give some examples. So seeing your integrity as being someone that has good credit score, that has nothing to do with your integrity, right? If it feels good to you to have a good credit score, and it feels aligned and clear in your heart, that's something that you'd like to have, that's wonderful. But it's not integrity, right? So what we want to do is, using this example, we can kind of reverse engineer what things that we might have muddied the water of integrity with, and give yourself permission to get out a little strainer and scoop out the mud, because the truth of what integrity is and what it really is it's a very high frequency, and it's clear. The water's clear with your integrity, and you can just kind of use this exercise of reverse engineering what you might have mixed up with integrity that actually has nothing to do with integrity at all.
It's a great point. So like, I used to feel really guilty if I ate meat, for example. I used to think that was out of integrity, and I found out that according to Buddhism, it's not actually killing, and actually people don't think I'm an evil person if I eat some chicken, right? And so,
and even if they did, that has nothing to do with your integrity, right? Integrity has nothing to do with people's expectations of you and fulfilling people's expectations of you.
Right. And so it's a value. So for some people, being vegan is part of their integrity, and for other people it's not. And so I was able to get by, I've been able to get by now still with this view that killing is wrong, but eating something that's already dead is not wrong. And so I don't need to hide it. I don't need to pretend I'm not eating chicken. Like I used to feel ashamed if I ate chicken in front of someone who was a vegan, or that's an example, I think, of what Michelle's talking about. Or at one point I thought that I wasn't pure unless I didn't have any caffeine, right? And so at one point I went, probably more, but there was 6 months where I went very consciously without it, and even before that I wasn't really drinking it, and I just thought to have a pure mind, I need to not have caffeine, and I used as a reason because when I drink caffeine, it makes my mind go crazy, and therefore it must have this effect on everyone, and therefore everyone that drinks caffeine is really not, they're hurting themselves, and therefore it's bad, and if I drink it, I'm bad too.
There's no extremes here, right? And I'm laughing because I did the exact same contemplation, and in my own crystal cave, and withheld caffeine from myself for 6 months to a year. So yeah.
Or if I go to a movie, if I watch a movie, does that mean that I'm all of a sudden an ordinary person? as a monk, I wasn't allowed to watch movies, and so I didn't watch movies unless I was with my family, and so I just associated that. So for some people, they're at a high level of spiritual practice where they wouldn't even watch a movie, and that's how they practice. And for another person, they're at a level where movies are fine, and most people are going to be at a level where you can flexibly occasionally do it beneficially, and occasionally you avoid it because it's not beneficial. And it's better to the question of is this beneficial or not is more important than what exactly is it.
Yeah.
Right? That's how you release the rigidness, and the external rule book is like what's beneficial and what's not. Well, that depends.
Right now, what's most beneficial in this exact moment?
And that's how you practice good boundaries. There's a great Tibetan yogi who said, my practice of discipline, or my practice of boundaries, or foundation, or whatever you want to call it, is watching my intention. And that was what he did. He just watched his intention. If it's a good intention, I do it. If it's not, I don't. If I can't tell, then I don't do anything, and I wait until I can see clearly, right? And you can generate good intentions too. You can specifically generate a good intention, practice generating good intentions, like I'm doing this to be of service to others, and you'll start to develop momentum with that. It'll get easy to do that, and you'll find yourself, consciously doing it. And if you always check, is this a good intention or not? And if it feels unpeaceful, by the way, it's not a good intention. This is how you can tell. If it's unpeaceful, it's a bad intention.
Or anger, frustration, unease.
Desires, attachment, jealousy, expectations, controlling. These are all bad intentions. Pride. It's all bad intentions. And so we want to, if we notice something unpeaceful, that's a cue. Oh, there's something negative in my mind right now. It doesn't mean everything in my mind is negative. It means there's something negative, and it's destroying the potency and purity of something else, maybe. And so we don't want to just take an action from that state because it'll be impure. We want to learn how to let go of the bad intention and just try to help ourselves and others become enlightened and awaken and become more conscious. This is always a good intention. Ourself and others, improving ourself and others, improving ourselves, helping others. That's sort of the intention that I would teach as like the best main intention for you, for everyone. I'm going to improve myself and help others. If you're doing this, it's good. If you're unpeaceful and you think, oh, maybe it's a bad intention, just try coming back to that. I'm here to improve myself and help others, and that will get you back on the right track. And this is the best way to have a foundation. Yes, there should be certain principles and rules that you live by. Good, right? But ultimately, we want a flexible way of practicing too, and the flexibility comes with your own intention.
Yeah, I really enjoy these points, and I like these points, and I think that when it comes down to it, our foundation is it's within us, right? And what's kind of fun about having psychic gifts is that I can kind of peer inside, or as I connect with others that I'm working with, it's like I can kind of see some of these different pieces, and giving yourself permission to, even as we kind of wrap up this video, giving yourself permission to see, where do I need to take a look at my foundation? Where are the holes? Where are the leaks? Where are the missing pieces in my foundation? And what can I do to bring my foundation up to that next level, even if you feel like it's already in a pretty good place? And where might my pride be blocking me from seeing those gaps in the foundation? And just allowing yourself to see what rises up within you as you ask that question.
Beautiful question. Yes, and just understand you will have to occasionally go back and readjust it. And here's one tip my teacher gave me at a certain point. He's like, up until now, you've been very focused on speed. You've been very concerned about having a practice that works fast. That's gotten you this far, but it won't take you any farther. From now on, you need to be more focused on sincerity of your practice instead of speed. Think my gold standard now is sincerity. I'm going to practice sincerely in a real, honest, true way authentically, and that's how the only way you can keep going and make more progress. And so I'd encourage you, maybe you're like me, where you focused on speed for a while and it got you to a certain place. It probably won't take you any farther. There are built-in ceilings to that. Okay, so at some point you need to focus on authenticity and sincerity of your practice, and that's how you fill in all the gaps, and then you can build this huge, tower, or whatever mountain or palace or castle on that space. Okay? And so that's my encouragement to you, is to get super authentic without losing confidence. Try to get authentic without feeling like you're a failure, right?
And let's get clear on something, because I think a lot of people think authentic equals negative. Authentic equals, right, like we hear this, like, I'm going to be real with you, and then it's like we use that as an in to disclose something negative that we don't like about that person. Right? So authenticity isn't negative. It's not a negative thing.
Right. And there are positive ways of relating to our own shortcomings. Right? Getting authentic might mean coming to grips with the fact that I have certain negative qualities that I need to release, and I can't really go further until I do. And that type of authenticity, that's a good start, but some people get depressed and despondent when they see something negative about themselves, and they fall into despair. We don't want to look at a negative quality within ourselves and fall into despair. We need to stay empowered. We need to stay encouraged. Stay encouraged by remembering these qualities are not you. They're just temporary pieces that you're seeing. They're temporary defilements. They're not actually you. Right? You are like a pure potential underneath all that. Right? You're like a pure heart, a good heart.
You're the not that.
Yeah.
Whatever that thing is, you're not that,
you're not
actually.
That. You're not that. So you can look at a negative quality and be like, oh, this is a virus in an overall healthy mind. That's a good way to see it, right? If you were to go and the doctor says you have whatever, you could, a healthy person would think, oh, well, I'm healthy, but this little thing is here. I'm just going to get rid of that thing, and then I'm fine, right? That's the model of health. And you want that same with your mind. Like, I'm healthy, my mind is healthy. It is, and my potential is pure and limitless. And there's this little thing that I need to work on. I can acknowledge it while staying strong, while remembering this is no match for my spiritual practice. I will easily release this. It is not going to harm me anymore. I'm going to know it. I'm going to acknowledge it. I can move forward. I can let it go. I can practice and let it go. And it doesn't have to get in the way. It doesn't define me. It never has. It's not going to be a giant weight that drags me down. Does that make sense? So these are the ways to think that allow you to look within, see something that's negative, see something that you don't like, but also feel encouraged, and to not let it make you feel despondent.
Yeah.
You do not want to be dragged down just by getting authentic. Authentic and empowered can be the same moment of mind. You want that. You want that.
And with love, you too can defeat anything.
Beautiful. All right, so let's end there. Thank you, and be sure to practice this authenticity, this integrity, get your foundations, watch your intention, and after practicing this, you'll be ready for the next video.